Hello and welcome to another installment of Real Talk. I'm John Walker, and with me as always is Norm Wurgler. How are you, Norm?
Doing great, ready to go.
Well, today we are going to talk about something interesting. It's probably up for endless debate. We're going to talk about good sequels. It's not very often that you have a film that is very successful and then that is followed up by a equally or maybe even greater successful sequel. We discussed this, and there was a large list, and we narrowed it down to 5 films for A, sake of time of this program, and B, because we wanted to, like I said, kind of only discuss either A, financially successful, and also something B that is, you know, when you watch it, it's a good movie. It's not just a good movie because it's got the attachment of the successful franchise on it. And also a lot of these sequels, all of them except for one,
that we're going to talk about, yes,
are sequels that came in a time where the actual having a trilogy or a franchise wasn't the norm, no pun intended.
No pun intended.
but it was
accepted.
Yes, but it was most of these films are you did a sequel only if the original was super successful and if it was backed by a major studio and made a ton of money, because it was just a lot of people, the only sequels were either horror franchises or just something that was only going to make money because it had a successful name.
Regardless, yes.
Yes. So let's go ahead and go ahead. I'm sorry.
And we're talking about the continuity of one sequel to the next being carrying across, so that it's still believable. We're learning something new about the characters.
Right. Yeah, all of these films are they're not completely different. It's all the continuity's all there. The storyline is the same, and so we'll go ahead and we'll start talking about our first sequel that was successful that we wanted to include on the list. And these are no specific order. The first one we were going to talk about is Aliens. This is a sequel to Alien, the Ridley Scott film, which was an amazing movie. And Aliens was directed by James Cameron, which I'm sure if any of you are movie fans know who that is. But James Cameron directed this, and it was really successful, and it actually did what it should have done, and it really escalated the series, because in the first movie there's one alien on a ship. In this movie they took the title literally, and now there's aliens, and it was a multiple threat. And so it made the tension a lot higher, the stakes a lot higher, and everything, the budget, everything was much bigger, and so it made for a really great film.
And we learn more about the character.
Yes, Sigourney Weaver's character, Ellen Ripley, comes back as sort of a consultant to help out because she's dealt with this species before, and they end up biting off more they can chew. And for lack of a better term.
Okay, this is going to be one of those shows.
Yes, it's going to be pun heavy. But let's go ahead and take a look at Aliens and get a taste of what it was about.
Movement!
What's the position?
Can't lock in.
Talk to me, Hudson!
Multiple signals. They're closing.
Go to infrared, people. Look sharp.
What's happening, Apong? Can't see anything in here.
Pull your team out, Gorman.
I got signals. I got readings in front and behind.
Where, man?
He's right. There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Tracker's off scale, man. They're all around us, man. Jesus.
Maybe they don't show up on infrared at all.
Apong. What is going on?
Spassky and Crow are down.
Dietrich! Crow!
Dietrich, Frost, off the board.
Sound off! Frost!
Frost!
That's a pretty intense moment.
Intense moment, yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we get to meet newer characters, the army troops. We get to meet and we get more of a sense of in the first episodes, if you will. Sigourney Weaver was just taking charge out of necessity, and she sort of groomed herself now in this next sequel to be more in charge. She's ready to take charge and get these people out of trouble.
Yeah, they want to, they feel like they are equipped for the situation because they're these, battle tough ready Marines that have handled this type of situation, not with an alien, but, have been in combat, and so, but she knows what they're up against, and so she knows if she doesn't take charge, then they're all going to die. So it's definitely, you see her an arc with her character that is very clear and leads from the first movie where, like you said, she was kind of, she was tough, but she had to become sort of the leader for everyone, and then that followed through, and like we were talking about with the storyline, it made perfect sense and made for a great film.
And Cameron and his DP, Adrian Biddle, managed to keep the same textures, the same darkness, the same energy of the photography from the first film. So there's that continuity that comes across, even though it's two different crews working. And the music by Jerry Goldsmith in the first Alien, excuse me. It carried over. He carried over some of his ideas that he exploited when he did the music for Planet of the Apes back in '68, experimenting with all kinds of different sounds, instrumental sounds, the shofar and echoplex, and that carried over into his Alien, which was also carried over by James Horner in Aliens.
Yes, so, I love the sound. Every time the aliens attack, the sound that they use, and it's evident that they did a really good job of making sure that, which they're supposed to. But
and I don't know what our audience is going to think, but there were a couple of more sequels after that were nowhere near as successful, in spite of the people. But then the Prometheus that just came out, well, not just came out, several years ago, a few years back, that sort of kind of plants the seed. Where did this all come from? How did this signal get there? So if you haven't, it would be interesting to see that one and then go back and watch these again.
And that's something else I would like to point out too, is we say sequel, and I know a lot of people may consider sequels could be the third movie or the fourth movie, and that was something else, is we only did the movie directly after the first film. Right. So it's sequel in the complete literal sense of the second movie, so we'll get to more of that later.
But moving right along. The
second film we would like to talk about today is another classic. It's Back to the Future 2. And Back to the Future 2, we kind of debated, we talked about maybe using the second, or the fifth actual Star Wars film instead of this, but one reason I wanted to talk about Back to the Future 2 instead of Empire Strikes Back is I wanted to say that it was even though it's the same movie, it has such a different feel because the time frame is so different. And Back to the Future, they're in the 50s. Back to the Future 2, they actually go to 2015, which we're in now, and which is interesting to see when you're watching the movie too. Apparently the Cubs are going to win the World Series this year, and also there's going to be Jaws Part 9 that's going to come out, which I think they're going to have to release a few of those before to catch up. But it's really neat to see. Robert Zemeckis actually talked about on the commentary, if you watch the film, how he didn't want to make the movie in the future originally because it just, by the time it catches up, as we see now, the future is nothing like 2015 is nothing like the way they portray 2015 in the movie. But the music is great. The feel is the same. It's got a very campy, light feel. Same crew. Zemeckis directed all three of the films, and also they were making 2 and 3 simultaneously, or back to back, actually, I should say. So it was a real challenge, I'm sure, for them to. It's a complete, like I said, it's a different time period. So even though the themes and the characters and a lot of it's the same, having such a different time period, you have to try to stay true to this reality. It doesn't exist.
And I think we'll see in this clip too, they recognize that as well. And so they constantly make comments like, This all sounds familiar. It seems familiar to me. You'll see it in this sequence.
Yeah, there's lots of, they hint to a lot of what's coming up in part 3 also.
Right,
There's all kinds of little, nods and winks to references that are in the third film, which you don't even know about because you haven't seen it, if you're watching it in real time when it actually came out. But let's go ahead and take a look at Back to the Future 2 and kind of get a feel for what that movie was like if you haven't already seen it.
Hey, stop! Little girl, stop! Look, I need to borrow your hoverboard. Where is he? Here. There! He's on a hoverboard! The board! Give me board! Get him!
Yeah, we got him!
Something very familiar about all this.
McFly, you bojo! The bus don't work on water! Unless you've got power! Oh, God! Batter up!
I love all the Back to the Future movies. I'm a big fan of. I think this is probably my favorite just because of all the over-the-top stuff that's actually happening now, and I mean the nostalgia of it. I mean, I love, even though it's supposed to be the future, it looks very 80s as far as the color scheme, which is not too far off because a lot of that stuff, that retro style, is popular again. So I mean, it could be considered predictable, but we were talking about it during the break, and I just when we were watching the clip, I just don't understand the logic of Michael J. Fox just standing there waiting for them to bash his brains in with a baseball bat, by the way, which he could have killed him.
But when you think about the original, too, the first Back to the Future, instead of going through the building, they would have wound up in the back of a dung truck with all that manure.
Which they do in the third movie. They bring the manure back.
Yeah.
And we were saying that, too, is how it's really impressive how they completely recaptured that sequence from the first film.
Sure.
Even though we're in a different time, it's still Hill Valley, it's still the same place, and so everything had to be similar, where he grabs on the back of the vehicle, and they miss him, and instead of, like you said, hitting the manure truck, they go into the clock tower, or what that was. And so I mean, it's kind of inside baseball for the people who are fans. If you're a big fan of the first film, you'd watch it and go, oh yeah, oh wow, and you'd be, you know, it would be one of those things that just pleases you as a viewer because they did such a good job of staying true to those movies and keeping it consistent throughout. Because in the third movie, it's kind of the beginning of Hill Valley, where it's you know, the Wild West, but everything is in a similar location, and it's just, you know, as the buildings adapt and become more modern, eventually we get to the future. But I guess that future really isn't even going to happen now because of what happens, spoiler alert, in the movie. But so it's interesting time travel can get tricky when you get into time travel movies of what can happen. But a lot of people have said that this is, I think it was Carl Sagan was actually quoted as saying that this was his favorite as far as time travel movies go.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
I don't know if he's thinking it's necessarily the most accurate.
No, I just saying, but his favorite. Yeah.
But it's his, of all the time travel movies that there have been, Back to the Future franchise is definitely his favorite. And actually the sequel to this film was not even supposed to be. Robert Zemeckis was actually quoted on the commentary saying that at the end of the first film, the to be continued was a joke. And it was so successful that the studio put pressure on him and like, no, we're doing another one.
that was a salute, if you will, to the early days of Hollywood where they did those Saturday serials. You would go see, you'd go to see a double feature, but there would also be a movie, Commando Cody, or the other day I was watching TMC and they were showing Batman, a serial of Batman from the 1930s, early 40s, somewhere in there. And it always ended to be continued. And of course that had a tremendous influence on Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. They grew up watching those movies.
Well, speaking of classics,
here we go.
Our next film is definitely a classic, The Godfather Part 2. And this is actually the first U.S. film to ever have a number in the title for a sequel to Part 2. There had been a sequel prior to that it was a British film that had Part 2 in it, so that was the first one ever. But this was the first ever U.S. film to have that. So I thought that was pretty interesting that had never happened before. But like we said, these films were taking place in a time where sequel wasn't the norm. Nowadays, you have, you know, we're releasing a trilogy. You know, it's planned in advance, and these were not.
Well, that's the Hollywood system, so to speak. If you've got a big blockbuster, let's make 2 or 3 more of them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, it definitely worked in this case.
Surely it did, especially if you can keep the same crew and the same cast.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got Francis Ford Coppola actually wanted to have, he had some difficulties directing the first film and there were tensions there, and so he wanted to actually have Martin Scorsese, who has had many great mob films, direct Godfather 2, but actually the producer of the film, I blanked on his name. It's Robert.
Just keep Evans.
Evans. That's right, Robert Evans. Yeah, classic Chinatown, and I mean tons of great films. Robert Evans wouldn't allow it, so he made Coppola do it, and Coppola did it, and it turned out great. And so let's take a look at The Godfather 2, and you can get an idea of what we're talking about.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
do with violence?
That's good stuff.
Yeah, we had to edit it for television, unfortunately. That scene is a lot more violent than what we had depicted there, but it's an excellent film. I mean, it's a mafia film. Of course, it's going to be violent, but actually, De Niro's character, Vito Corleone, this also was the first time in a film where two different actors had won an Oscar for the same role. Brando won for Vito for The Godfather and for Best Actor, and then he won Best Supporting Actor for this film, Godfather 2. So that was another interesting little fact about this film. But it's an amazing movie. I mean, both of the Godfather films. Godfather 3 is pretty good, but the first two are definitely both home runs.
What I find intriguing, particularly about this particular scene, is that here we have the young Vito Corleone finishing off this man while the party's going on outside, and he shoots him. And at the end of, toward the end of the original Godfather, Michael Corleone is going through this service of baptism with his godson, and at the same time he has his minion out there wiping out all the 5 families, and so and you have this interesting organ music playing in the background. It's very subtle, and here instead you've got the party going on, the fireworks, but you can see the violent side of this this family,
and also a good contrast of both situations from the Godfather and Godfather 2 is it's kind of a celebration of life while death is happening, right next door. So, want to get to our next film, and that is Terminator 2. Now, Terminator 2 has been regarded by a lot of people as the greatest sequel of all time, as far as being from the original to the sequel. Actually, the sequel people preferring the sequel to the original. I know that's something else that's probably highly debatable, but I don't think so. But I think it's a really good film.
I'm going to just guess that a few people kind of like the idea of Arnold Schwarzenegger actually being the good guy instead of the bad guy.
Yeah, and that's definitely a big difference in this film.
You know, that iconic "I'll be back." Oh, I can't get that low. "I'll be back" is priceless.
Yeah, they had to think of a way to make the story interesting. So the Terminator in the first film going to kill Sarah Connor, and in the second film, now he's protecting John, her son, but he becomes the leader of the resistance at the Rise of the Machines, and he protects Sarah also from the T-1000, which we'll see that was their kind of introduction of the new technology to be like, isn't this cool?
Yeah, and because of all this time travel stuff going on, it's totally plausible as far as the film is concerned.
Right.
You can get away with bringing him back again as the next model.
You can take many liberties and you can go back and change anything you want.
It's good to be the king.
Yes. So let's take a look at Terminator 2. Yeah, one thing about this film that I think it makes it a very landmark film is that this is, to me, the birth of really good digital effects. This was the first movie, I think, that I can remember seeing, in the theaters, and as just like, wow, look at what computers can do. And now, I mean, it's if they remade this, they're actually coming out with a new Terminator movie pretty soon, which I'd be interested to see. But whenever you see the T-1000 doing those liquid metal effects and everything, it was just really pushing the boundaries at the time. And again, another James Cameron film, which Aliens was James Cameron. So this is our second James Cameron film that we're talking about on this list. So that's pretty impressive to not only have the body of work that he has, but to have two sequels of the caliber of Aliens and Terminator 2, where the action is just beyond the scope of what is imaginable for most people. When they go see a movie, they're just blown away by his films usually.
And of course, in this film, the original film, Sarah Connor is the one who's being chased and fleeing from the Terminator. And of course, in this one, now it's her son, and then ultimately her. And we didn't see the scene where the new Terminator walks through the steel bars, and of course his gun gets caught. And of course, the original psychologist who said he's wacko, talking about the first movie. Is standing there watching this and just doesn't know what to make of all of this. It's intriguing. Oh yeah, I mean it was again like we talked about with the kind of the story arc continues, and it is very it's very linear and it makes sense, even though it's time travel where we've got characters traveling from the future to the past. In the world of the people who exist in the present, everything is happening on a very linear scale to where, this happens, the kid grows up, they have to protect him, and Sarah Connor's character takes a character arc because she's this, she was a waitress, I believe, in the first film. And, she goes from being this very afraid, very vulnerable woman to kind of like Sigourney Weaver's character, but very strong, and because she ends up, spoiler alert, killing the Terminator at the end of the first film. And so whenever Arnold shows up, she assumes automatically that he's there to kill her, and she becomes defensive, and she has to sort of change and realize that, I believe she has a line in the film where the machine could be a better father to her son than any man I remember
could ever
that's
be.
a really poignant moment when you stop and think about it, because it's all voiceover, it's narrated, but it's actually a very poignant moment for that film. And I was also thinking that in this second film, of course, we get a greater explanation about how all this apocalypse took place. In the first film, we're watching the machines grinding down the bones of dead people and so forth. But in this one, we get to witness a little bit more of the nightmare that was about to take place, which in the third episode becomes a reality. So.
Well, now on to our final film, and I think we may have saved the best for last, in my opinion. But this is The Dark Knight, the sequel to Batman Begins, directed by Christopher Nolan. And I would venture to say that this, to me, is a better sequel to the original than Terminator 2 is to Terminator. I was a huge fan of Batman Begins, and I had no expectations for this film because I thought there was no way that it could top Batman Begins because it was such a fresh take on the Batman story, and I really enjoyed the way Christopher Nolan did it because it had a lot more just grittiness and reality to me, and I like that in superhero movies, even though the concept is completely impossible. But I liked how it was more rooted in reality. And in this movie, I did not think they could top what they had done, and they completely blew it away, in my opinion. I thought Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker, best Joker ever, in my opinion. I know that's another highly debatable concept, but I thought that really, the acting, I think all the movies we've looked at.
Wait, you mean he's better than Cesar Romero? I'm sorry.
I think he is. Only because you could see Cesar Romero's mustache under his makeup, which, come on. But they
sorry folks, TV flash.
But what I think the two films that I think had the best acting that we're talking about are The Dark Knight and Godfather 2. I think the other films the action and sort of the scale has been escalated. That makes it a great film. They were already great films, and so in order to make the second film great, it had to be just bigger on scale. But I think with this film and Godfather 2, even though a lot of the action of The Dark Knight was bigger, I do think that the acting was better also. It was very well written, very well shot, very well directed, and everybody did a great job, just like Godfather 2, where you didn't expect such a good narrative film could be improved upon in the same manner without some kind of gimmick.
You said something that I think I would like to expand on just a little bit, because we're talking about the director, and from my perspective, I always like to talk about the music a little bit more, but we lose sight of the sound designer that takes all these sounds, combines them, and comes up with these incredible, sound effects. And of course, the director of photography was responsible for all of the things that you see, in conjunction with the director, of course. And we begin to recognize through all these, but the first one, Aliens, that the director, the DP, the director of photography, the composer, and the editor are the same crew for all of these, whenever possible. I remember thinking in the old Hollywood system, you got whoever was available. Some of the big stars had their favorite DP because they liked the way they lit them. I mean, Greta Garbo had one DP and that was it. This man lit her perfectly. So when we're watching films, when you're watching films out there, be sure, take time, look at the credits, but give credit where credit's due. Look at what the sound designer, the Foley artists are doing to make this sound real and believable.
Oh yeah, and a lot of the people who become the directors and the cinematographers, I mean, they had to have other jobs. They worked their way up the chain a lot of the time, so they earned their keep, and they did a lot of those jobs that people don't get recognized for. Yeah, definitely, they call it the Hollywood machine for a reason, because there are many moving parts.
I didn't get us too distracted before we get to see our clip here.
Yes, well, let's take a look at The Dark Knight.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy. He can't feel the neck. See?
You wanted me. Here I am.
I wanted to see what you'd do. And you didn't disappoint. You let 5 people die. Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Where's Dent?
Those mob fools want you gone so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
And why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. You complete me.
You're garbage. You kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. But when they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper. You see, their morals, their code. It's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Where's Dent?
You have all these rules, and you think they'll save you.
Who's in control? I have one rule.
Oh, then that's the rule you'll have to break to know the truth.
Which is?
The only sensible way to live in this world is without rules. And tonight, you're gonna break your one rule.
I'm considering it.
No, there's only minutes left, so you're gonna have to play my little game if you want to save one of them.
Yeah.
You know, for a while there, I thought you really were a Dent. The way you threw yourself after her. Look at you go! does Harvey know about you and his little bully?
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
Choose between one life or the other. Your friend, the district attorney, or his blushing bride to be. You have nothing to threaten me with. Nothing to do with all your strength. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell you where they are. Both of them. And that's the point. You'll have to choose. He's at 250 52nd Street, and she's on Avenue X. That's just a...
Which one you going after?
Rachel!
That's one of those films that no matter when it's on, where it's on, I have to stop and watch it because it's just so good, and the acting, like I said, is so good. And we were talking about Foley when he was punching the Joker in the face. Those thuds, I mean, you could feel it. They did, like you said, they did an excellent job of bringing that to life and making it real, make it feel very real to you.
Yeah. It's not the Batman of my childhood.
No.
He's beaten.
Well, it's based on Frank Miller's The Dark Knight series that he wrote for DC Comics. And it was just, that was kind of what they wanted. They wanted something darker. They wanted to kind of venture away from the old known Batman.
Yeah, well, the pure at heart kind of guy. He's got a bad side. He's got feelings like everyone else, and he's losing his temper. He's got to find these people. He's got to find them now. So he's going to do whatever it takes to do that.
And I mean, he had a very traumatic childhood, a lot of horrible things. So I mean, it would make sense that he would.
He would harbor some of this angst.
You don't want to. It's supposed to be. I know it's supposed to be for kids because it's based on comics and things like that. But I just like how they acknowledge the reality of it instead of hiding from it, because I think that that's something that you don't. For little kids, sure, you don't want to.
This is more for big kids.
It's for big kids, but you definitely, even in the old comics, I mean, Bruce's parents were murdered, and so I mean, these are very heavy topics, and so they actually address them instead of kind of glamorizing them or sweeping them under the rug and trying to not talk about it. They bring it right out in front of you.
I do want to take a moment and just touch on music. Even though this particular clip, the music just started to kick in toward the end. This was a team that worked together. It's Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard wrote the music, and they did the music for the first one, for the one before that as well, The Batman Begins. And it's really interesting in terms of what music can tell us about the character. And I want to read this quote because the question was asked of Hans Zimmer, are you going to write more melodic kind of music, the way, such as the music that Danny Elfman did for Tim Burton's Batman? And he said, absolutely not, because sometimes if too much music gives us a false impression of the character. As it's particularly our Batman is how he referred to it. And James Newton Howard chimed in, and I'm going to read this quote. It would give you too much information about this character, which is not true if it's bubbly kind of music. It would be misinformation. When you assign a heroic theme to something, some kind of tune, you're giving away a lot more of information that may or may not be true about the guy. So, the synthesis of image and music sometimes can give us a false impression of what's going on up there, especially if you're trying to give us a light little melody about a dark character, you see. So I wanted to bring that up because it's also just the importance that music plays in this whole concept of making a film.
Yeah, and I think, the key to greatness is, when it comes to making a film, is knowing when to use it, when to not use it, and like you said, knowing when it's going to affect your audience and knowing how it's going to, make the story play out.
Well, for example, if we were to take the theme music for E.T., dee-da-da-da-da-dee-da, when he's flying, that gives you the impression of this happy-go-lucky, nice alien who's not going to eat the children. Whereas if he turned around and ate somebody, all of a sudden that tune would give us a lot of false information about that fellow.
Well, we've got to fly because our time is up, so we got to get out of here. So, Norm, always, thank you for being here.
Same here.
And thank you all for joining us on Real Talk, and we'll see you next time.